Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Satori, Incorta, and Unravel Data. I'm Stephen Fagg, Director at Database Trends and Applications and Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Succeeding with DataOps, Implementing, Managing, and Scaling. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question is not selected during the show, you will receive an email response. Plus, all viewers today will be entered for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for participating. Now, to introduce our speakers for today, we have Ben Herzberg, Chief Scientist at Satori, Ashwin Warrior, VP of Product Management at Incorta, and Chris Santiago, Vice President of Solutions Engineering at Unravel Data. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Ben. Welcome to the broadcast, Ben.
Thank you, Stephen. First of all, it's very nice not seeing anyone, but at least knowing that there are people in here, and that's awesome. A little bit about myself. My name is Ben. I am a co-author of the Snowflake Security book, recently published for A-Press Springer, and I'm a chief scientist for Satori, the DataSecOps platform. As chief scientist, I'm leading the research for the company. Before that, I was leading the research at Imperva, and before that, I was CTO at Cynet, and before that, a bunch of other technological positions. And that's me, because you can't see me in the video. So let's, before we begin into what Satori does and what it has to do with DataOps, in my two previous positions, which I mentioned, I was sitting on top of gold mines in terms of, or treasure chest in terms of the data I had and the data operations I was running. I had a lot of great data. For example, leading the research for Imperva, I had data of all the attacks happening on hundreds of thousands of applications, and many people in the organizations I was working at were looking for parts of this data that was always alive. Data was moving here and reached there, and many people wanted this data to be helpful for them in what they were doing: customer success, support, SOC analysts, sales, marketing. Everybody wanted a piece of the data, but the problem was that data is also intertwined with sensitive data for many reasons, personal PII, personal data, and other operational sensitive data, and other types of sensitive data. And it was always a conflict for me, at least, how I could share the data with other people on the organization without exposing myself personally to a risk, and the organization as an organization. And this and other things were big influencers in why I went to Satori and why we went to do what we do today. So when we look at DataOps today, and many organizations are, and I saw that my colleagues will also discuss DataOps. So when organizations has large data operations within their companies, and they have a lot of data, and some of it is sensitive, and data keeps on changing, like it used to be for me, and it's also for me like that in Satori. It reminds me of what happened with DevOps and the way security needs to be a first-class citizen in all of this operation, like it had to become in application deployment. So DataSecOps, we are a DataSecOps platform, meaning that we are bringing capabilities needed to have large data operations for organizations with a lot of data consumers, a lot of data producers, and a lot of data that keeps on changing without slowing down the access to data. So, a lot of risks are out there. No need to mention, I'm guessing, a lot of risks are out there when analyzing data at scale, when a lot of people require access to data, along with the great value we're seeing and our customers are seeing around having data and analyzing that data by many people in the organization, data democratization. There are also risks in letting more people access data. They can be security risks, they can be compliance risks. Organizations tend to need compliance, for example, that's more and more continuous and ongoing. So in many cases, they need for example, to know where sensitive data is in the organization on a day-by-day basis, not once every quarter or once every year. So we saw a lot of need for that. And when allowing people access to data, we noticed that the problem is that organizations need to touch many controls in different places in order to achieve this DataSecOps or achieving a secure data access that is also fast and scalable. And in many cases, it involves different teams that has different knowledge and different abilities. Some of the handling of access control within SQL is a problem, for example, for security teams. And then, as one CISO was telling me last week or a week before, it's like I have visibility over my network, I have visibility over the endpoints, but data is like a black box. It's really hard for us as a security team to understand what's going on, and we usually need to implement the policies we have to implement through other people, namely the data engineering teams, the DataOps teams, the DBAs, or other teams. So what we thought was that it would be amazing to have a universal data access and security platform that will where organizations can manage all of their security policies across all of their data platforms from one place in a simplified way, implement access policies, and do that with as little disruption as possible to the data, because on the other hand, all of our customers and the people we speak with, they are kind of, we need the data project to be happening today. Not we can't afford to delay projects in months to get security done. So basically, we mapped the 5 key capabilities that were needed in our hand, that were needed to achieve DataSecOps, for organizations to have a simplified, secure data access, especially when sensitive data is concerned. Basically, it's one thing that was very important is the continuous data discovery and classification, meaning that if you're doing an audit of your sensitive data or a mapping of your sensitive data, a discovery of your sensitive data, and let's say that it's perfect, and you know where you have every piece of sensitive data in your organization, and you do it once a year or even once a quarter or once a month, and the data keeps on changing. There are a lot of people who are now touching data. Then it can be one day later, someone copies something somewhere, and you're out of sync, and that's a big deal. And so one piece of the puzzle is having a continuous data discovery and classification. The other piece of the puzzle has to do with actually protecting that sensitive data. So it's a simplified and effective way to dynamically mask data, give different data consumers different levels of anonymization of the data or of masking of the data in a simple way and without any reliance on the different data platforms themselves. So without saying, okay, we can do this on that platform or on our snowflakes, but we can't do that on our MySQL. And the other thing is ABAC or granular data access policies. For example, I have data analysts. I want them to only be able to access our data stores using Tableau or Looker, but not using other technologies. So that's an example. Or I want to integrate it with my timeshift platform. So the analysts can only connect to the data when they're on shift, things like that. Another very important piece of the puzzle is to automate and simplify the way access is granted and revoked. You want to make it as simple as possible. So for example, we allow doing that with a Slack integration. So I can get a message on my Slack channel saying, Ben, do you want to allow X access to a certain data set? And I can approve or deny that from Slack or by other integrations. But making it simple also means that I will not give people too much access to data, because it's very easy for me to give them additional access when they need it. And finally, monitoring, auditing for compliance requirements. And it was very important for us to do that in a way that will be transparent without touching the data itself. And we do that by being between the users, the data consumers, and the data as it's being accessed. So looking at the this is a partial list of the supported platforms and tools that we support, and of course feel free to reach out to ask any specific questions. And basically doing that or applying data access on databases, it can be done manually by data engineering teams. Many of our customers were trying to do that, discovering that there is a lot of hidden costs when trying to cope with all the regulations and the speed in which you need to enable access to data and do it in a secure way. Then there are also systems to orchestrate things, which solves some of the problems, but doing this in a way that is compatible with all the data platforms in the same way, in a truly universal way, and without changing anything in the data. That is why we built the system in the way we did. That is, sitting between the data consumers and the data they're accessing as a transparent proxy. Last thing is why organizations, some of the main use cases they use us for. Sometimes it's for compliance and regulations and keeping a very rich audit of who's accessing data. Sometimes it's to ease workflows to get access to data, to make it in a simple yet secure way. And of course, data discovery is a large part of it, and having a simple way to apply security policies on the data access. So that was a short 10-minute introduction to what we do, but of course, feel free to read more in our website, or feel free to reach out directly to me. I'm sure I left also many questions. Of course, feel free to ask them as well, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. I hope I gave a minute or two back to my colleagues for their session.
Thank you very much, Ben. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker for today. Once again, Ashwin Warrior, VP of Product Management at Incorta. Welcome to the broadcast, Ashwin.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for having me, and it's good to be here. As we talk about DataOps and we look at scale with DataOps, one of the big things that we focus on today in this particular session is around analytics and how you can scale with DataOps. So we talk about DataOps as a set of practices, processes, and technology-driven perspective, right, on data. But from a technology perspective, there is one big problem that we're looking to solve, especially when you look at Incorta and what the founders' core focus was when they built the product. The whole premise was you had applications, and you had applications, legacy applications with ERP, on-premise operational data stores, and there was a need to get this data to business users so that they can glean meaningful insights out of it, right? And you could say that yes, there are data warehouse-based solutions. There are plenty of solutions out there that can do this. But our focus when the company was built from the ground up was focused on solving one key problem, right? And with the hours of the hundreds of years of Oracle application experience, having worked with Fortune 1000 companies extensively, this cohort had the knowledge base and the drive to solve one key problem, which is how do you take your business users and provide them the data needs that they have, meaningful insights in the most efficient way possible, and trying to make technological leaps, right, in the process of doing so. And so we'll focus a little bit in terms of the problem and what we have as a solution to offer. So when you think about a modern data stack and you look at the complexity of the data stack, there are some great solutions, by the way, right, in this space. Lots of great innovation, lots of great product offerings in this space. There are still some inherent challenges, right? You've got the proliferation of cloud-based applications. You've got on-premise applications that still continue to be the backbone of large enterprises. So you've got SAP, you've got Oracle. Some of the smaller companies are moving their transactional systems to the cloud with NetSuite, with Salesforce, ServiceNow. But at the core, you've got all these data sources, right? And it's rich with data. It's rich with operational data that business users need to build analytics on top of. So the first thing that in a modern data stack that you see is data being moved to a data lake or cloud data warehouses or some combination of the two, right? The whole idea is making this data readily accessible and doing refinements along the way, right? And there are great tools out there that do refinements in terms of converting the data into a star schema, building cubes on top of it, making it ready for line of business users. But to us, there are two big challenges with this stack, with this approach, when it comes to enterprise analytics and operational reporting. The first one is to get through this entire process. It takes weeks, if not months. In most cases, for large organizations, it's months. And the second big problem is when you finally get the data into the hands of your departmental users, you've now aggregated the data, right? There's so much of your low fidelity data that is gone because you've done summarizations, aggregations, and now if you need to build a bridge between this this analytics plane, if you will, and the operational plane, you've now got to do some purpose-built work to try and make that happen. So that tends to be a big problem with most enterprise analytic offerings that you see. So what is Incorta's vision and why are we different, right? One of the big differences between the previous slide and this that we try to highlight is we do enrichments, but we don't try to create transformations to take your source third normal form data and convert that into star schemas. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there are certain use cases where you've got very high frequency operational reporting at scale for enterprise use cases that it becomes extremely imperative that you keep as much of your source schemas in your schema maps as is in the third normal form, and you make an exact copy of that, right? Because it helps with things like customizations, and we'll talk about how that helps with customizations. But even before we go to customizations, the very fact that we are making an exact copy with minimal amount of change, the same fidelity, means that now your business users can get access to their data at scale in just a matter of days. And in some cases, we've actually had our customers sign up for a cloud trial, connect to their instance, and it quickly lights up the data all the way from extracting it, doing some enrichments, to lighting up dashboards out of the box with our blueprints. So the whole vision here is, how do you build efficiency in this data pipeline of getting data from all your source systems into the hands of your line of business users, where they say that at the end of the day, they have the data to provide actionable insights on which they can go ahead and take actions, right? So here's just a snapshot of the BI landscape. And if you were to talk to the Fortune 50 customers, one such example, they talked about the proliferation of their analytic tools. They had 5 different tools in their company. They had as many as 1,500 plus unique reports across the line of business. Many of these are repetitive, right? Slicing the data by different dimensions, just the nature of how reports and analytics proliferates. Approximately 2,000 unique users. The average query time was greater than 2 minutes. Not ideal. Data refreshes are daily, and this becomes a big problem, right? If you tell business that you can get your data just once a day, then you're not really being a data-driven organization, right? The true measure of how data-driven an organization is really reflected by how quickly users can take action on the data that they get. If you can give them refreshes twice a day, 4 times a day, 6 times a day, you're slowly empowering them to make more informed decisions sooner, right? And that typically is an indication of being data-driven. So when it takes you 8 days or greater than 8 days to time to insight, it's a big problem, because if I have a new question I have to ask and I need my IT team involved, it's not all available at the self-service layer. I need to go build these extensions in the data model. That's never a good state to be in, right? And it sort of hinders your efficient data pipelines in a DataOps framework that we talk about. Fast forward to this Fortune 50 customer, post-installation at Incorta, and a really large customer at scale, right? And this customer comes back and says, we really love the fact that we can search for keywords on your dashboards, locate journal entries, be able to drill down into details, right? And the fact that 99% of the users, when they did an internal survey, felt that they had an improved solution, it's a great feeling. But it really boils down to the next 3 tiles that you're seeing, right? If you can do 96 data refreshes a day, some people may say this is excessive. Why would you do 96 refreshes? I agree, in some cases you don't, but if you're in a large organization, it's the end of the quarter, you're doing period close, you're looking at closing your books and doing refreshes quite often, this is extremely valuable, right? It's not just hitting a source system. It's trying to do analysis like aging of your invoices, where you need to build some enriched value additions in your extracts. You're looking at other entities that could be not just one single table in your source, right? So it's not just operational reporting. It's actually being able to do analytics with multiple refreshes, where any new insight you want, you can build right away. And the average query time is a few seconds. So if you've got fast refreshes, fast query times, they are the hallmark of trying to build a data-driven organization, right? Because more power to your users, they get the data as quickly as they want to build the insights and the downstream value additions that they want. So that's the key value here. And so to get to the core of why Incorta as we like to claim, one of the most agile analytic platforms around. And the reason for that is it really boils down to some of the things we talked about, right? The first thing is the whole premise of the fact that you don't have to build these data transformation pipelines. The moment you build your star schemas, and it's great when you have refreshes once a day, but as you start to have multiple stars and relationships that you need to build between stars and custom enhancements and so on, it becomes extremely hard to manage, right? It becomes extremely hard to continuously keep up with all the customizations, and trying to build a pipeline that is that can really scale efficiently to your customer needs. So it starts with the first thing, right? Setup. If you were to sign up for an Incorta instance, if you go to Incorta.com, sign up for a cloud trial, and really, if you have any of these source systems, if you have database-driven operational store, or if you have, like we talked about with NetSuite or Salesforce on the cloud, Oracle or SAP as on-premise, you just point to these instances, provide your credentials, and really get up and running. As simple as it sounds, it's actually the easiest way to get started. And what you realize is we've also built a lot of the basic maps, right? We know some of the source tables and all these different instances. So we've built these maps that make it really easy for you to leverage out of the box content. We call them our blueprints, and to really be able to deploy the blueprints, and maybe 70%, 80% of your source data is built into meaningful logical data sets that you can then start to analyze on through your dashboards and insights. And that we're talking about in hours, because once you provide your connections, you let the loads run, you're talking of looking at your data on a cloud analytics platform in a matter of hours, if not days, with minor enhancements and enrichments, right? So the fact that you're giving business users data that they can start to work with in just a few hours or days, and the ability to iterate over it, right? Iterating over it means if your user comes back and says, this is great, but I'd like to add my data from HubSpot, or I'd like to add my data from ServiceNow, and I want to bring them all together, right? Look at all the data from two systems together. It starts to become a challenge when you have your traditional approaches and you've got to build data engineering pipelines. But if you take all of that friction away and you provide a more easier approach of just take your exact source system maps, build on top of it, and create these logical entities on top of which you can build dashboards. You can, if you'd like to take it to an external tool like Tableau or Power BI and use those for your last mile consumption, that's great. If you want to build dashboard entities within Incorta and use the Incorta dashboarding layer to then do bursting of reports or sending it out as PDF to people, you can do that as well. It opens up the door for a lot of analytics consumption models. So the key takeaway here is if you have enterprise data at scale, right, from all these legacy applications or a mix of legacy and on-premise and cloud applications, and you're looking for a modern analytics tool mainly for your operational reporting use cases, it's very easy to sign up for Incorta Cloud, give it a try. And what you'll see is the agility to be able to quickly build and get to your insights in just a few hours, and then to be able to run large-scale queries at scale, and it performs in sub-seconds, right? And to be able to continue to build on it and build your custom enhancements and grow the analytics community so you can continue to be data-driven. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you, and I'll give the floor back to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our final speaker for today. We have Chris Santiago, Vice President of Solutions Engineering at Unravel Data. Welcome to the broadcast, Chris.
Great. Thanks for having me, Stephen. And a special thanks again to Ben and Ashwin. I have the privilege of going last, so interesting to see, the DataOps world from a DevSecOps perspective as well as an analytics perspective. So again, thank you for setting me up. For folks who don't know me, my name is Chris Santiago, VP of Solutions Engineering at Unravel Data. I've been in the big data space for a little bit under a decade. I've been with Unravel for about 4 years. And the customer base with Unravel, we have been in the big data space. That's been our, it has been our forte for, since the beginning. And so, we've worked with a lot of large Fortune 500 companies. And now with the advent of cloud, it's starting to bring in some more mid-sized market companies. So I'm hoping with my experience, I can teach you guys a little bit of best practices and how Unravel can help throughout your data ops journey. So we'll first start off by talking about where we're at today, right? When we think of big data, folks that are dealing with a lot of data itself, we tend to first think about, on-PP systems, on-prem systems. Hadoop comes to mind. And with the advent of the cloud, it has really helped data-driven success for folks to really finally achieve their business outcomes, right? With the ability of the cloud, now they have even more powerful instances. They have infinitely scalable data storage. The agility that they get out of these new tech stacks is phenomenal. In fact, a lot of new use cases have been born out of technology that couldn't have existed once the cloud came out. And then obviously infinitely scalable, right? So now we are seeing more and more companies be very data driven into building out and achieving the business outcomes that they're looking to achieve. But then at the same time too, this also does add some complexity, right? Does add some unpredictability. I mean, a lot of times these cloud tech stacks that are out there, that they're a little bit on the newer side. So maybe we're a little bit, finding the right resources to really make the most out of these services. Maybe hard to find, right? And at the end of the day, if you're not taking advantage, or if you're not keeping in check costs and resources, in this pay-as-you-go world, things can actually end up being more expensive than what you were potentially paying when you were doing this, hosting it yourself. Now I'm going to go and put on a different lens here, and let's talk about the specific teams that are affected with your data ops process as you guys are implementing and managing your data ops pipelines, right? You've got your data engineers. So these are the folks hands on the keyboard that are working with, Python. Maybe they're writing some Spark code. Maybe they're using some ETL tools, excellent ETL tools that are out there, right? And their primary performance or their issue with once these things start getting more complex is, hey, my app is not hitting my SLAs. How can I make this more reliable? If you think about like the data platform folks, they're also a team as well. So they're supporting the data engineers, making sure that they get everything that they need, but they're getting tickets left and right? Hey, why did this thing break? Why did this thing take too slow? I was expecting my data to arrive in my, on my table here, and it's not here. What's going on, right? So they've got a plethora of things, and they don't have all the answers, right? Then you've got the data architects. So these guys are the ones that are forward thinking, and they're thinking about architecture as well, right? So maybe they have some on-prem use cases and they're looking to move that up into Azure, into AWS, into Google, but their big concern is, how do I make sure that I'm doing this in the right manner, right? We also have other customers that are looking to move from one cloud to another, right? All top of mind questions. And so without having a clear line of scope of how to address these challenges, that'll be something top of mind for the data architect. Last but not least, we have our business folks that are looking at things from a cloud bill perspective, right? So why is my cloud bill too high? I need a better way govern costs, right? So having the guardrails so that way they feel that they're making and meeting their ROI with these initiatives that they're spending so heavily on with data ops, that's going to be top of mind for these folks. Now, let's go ahead and start drilling into like a problem, right? And when we think about all of these folks, it all starts off with a collection of jobs, right? These jobs have some dependencies. They have services that they're working amongst each other. And essentially, so Kafka could be one thing where they're bringing in this information from a streaming side. Airflow could be the way to orchestrate some of these jobs into, consumable jobs, right? This could be landing into Spark. And Spark could be doing some ETL all the way into Hive. So that's going to create those SQL tables for folks like that are going to be looking at this from like Tableau, right? Now that's an example of a data pipeline, but let's actually go in a little bit further, right? When we think about organizations, we're talking about large volumes of pipelines, right? So this isn't just one. I mean, one can be a very important one, but at the same time, it could be something that, for lots of our customers could have pipelines that have hundreds of jobs. And from there, they could have pipelines of hundreds to thousands of that, right? So even at the pipeline level, that starts getting very complex and hard to manage. And these services are complex in their own right? So we had talked previously about Kafka, Airflow, Spark, Hive, all the barn animals in Hadoop. All of these are distributed systems, and that it becomes very cumbersome when we're trying to figure out where my pipeline, where did things break, right? Was it in the ingestion side? Was it in the processing side? Why is my ETL job, not meeting the SLAs, right? It all gets compounded because these are all distributed environments, right? So we're talking multiple instances. And a lot of times we're talking about data that can be stored in multiple geographical regions, right? So from a complexity from that standpoint, even just starting to just find out where the issue is on your stacks can get very cumbersome from that. Then we had another layer of complexity, right? So now we've got folks that are becoming to be truly multi-cloud, right? What that means is I want to have my data and some of my services in AWS, or maybe it's Google, or maybe it's Azure, and maybe I still have some use cases that are going on from in my on-prem environment today, right? And so now you're actually exacerbating the problem here by being able to manage all these multiple environments, right? Now, there are some options. Each of these cloud stacks and on-prem stacks do have point tools, right? So if you think about on-prem, you have maybe Clutter Manager, which is a configuration service for Hadoop. You've got Amazon CloudWatch for AWS. All this stuff can connect to Grafana, right? Azure Monitor from Azure on the Azure side, Stackdriver from Google. Again, the challenge with this is all of these are point tools that are going to be very specific to the service that they're running. And also some of the services themselves, like for example, Spark, they have an excellent UI to understand where things are going wrong with my code. That's going to be just very specific to Spark alone, right? And so you start seeing these silos, right? I've worked with many customers where they try to solve this problem by creating their own reporting, right? No problem with that. But the challenge with that is maintaining this. APIs are always changing. Even services themselves are always changing. So even kind of keeping up with just having some basic rudimentary graphs to understand and observe where some of my issues are across multiple clouds, it becomes very, very hard to manage because of all the complexity across all of the cloud environments. Now, if I were to boil this down, if you think about today's state of trying to do this with the point tools that you have today, there's going to be 4 key things where they're going to fall flat. One is they really weren't meant for this modern data / big data environment. And so you're only getting partial picture, right? So you can't really, it's hard for you to manage and understand where things are going wrong if you can't see what the problem is. The second thing is, hey, I just want answers, right? Don't give me all these pretty graphs. That's great. But like a lot of times I still don't understand what the root cause is, right? And so because of the complexity, it becomes very overwhelming that even the experts can take days, and sometimes they even just don't even resolve it because it's a very complex issue. And so you really need just answers, not just visibility. From a governance standpoint, we talked about all the clouds, right? Where's all my spend going? Where are all the resources going? How do I best govern this so that way, all of my data engineers, data operations, data architects are getting what they need, but we're also not going over budget, right? So you need centralized governance for that and insights and recommendations for optimization from that standpoint. Last but not least, from a migration standpoint, things will always be changing. Right now, you see a lot of push to the cloud today. That's going to change, right? From maybe VMs into maybe, Kubernetes, right? There's always going to be changing. And so we always need to be thinking about how are we going to migrate some of these, some of my legacy code, some of my legacy platforms, and modernizing it into something else where whatever the next new shiny thing is from years to come, how do I go ahead and migrate that? So you need insights from a migration perspective so you can have that agility yourself. And that's where Unravel comes in. So Unravel is a platform that does top to bottom observability, right? We talked about all the clouds. We have think of it as a single pane of glass of understanding what's happening at a job level, at a service level. And so we have complete visibility across all your environments. We also have this optimization in a box feature, which is very, very popular amongst our users. And think of that as, hey, I've got a Snowflake expert in the box. I've got a Databricks expert in the box. I have a Amazon EMR expert in the box, or a Synapse expert in the box, whatever it is, right? That's going to be telling you, hey, you should be sizing your instances this way, or, pick this instance type because maybe you're doing some machine learning work, right? we have that expertise that gives you those proactive insights and recommendations ahead of time to up-level some of your junior resources. From a cost governance standpoint, we have the ability to really get into fine-grained visibility and say, where are my costs going? But more importantly, let's actually set some budgets so we can understand if we're tracking to budget month over month by user, by project, whatever it may be. We have the ability to do that, as well as provide recommendations for even more optimization, whether it's optimizing at the instance level or optimizing at the job level. That's where our key strength is. And from a migration standpoint, let's empower you everything that you need so you can feel comfortable and understand what our timelines, effort to take, and what this will ultimately cost me if I were to go re-platform into whatever the new sexy modern data service that's out there today. The way we do this is we connect into everything that we had talked about above, right? So on-prem, all the major cloud services. We'll be looking at things such as like the application profile. We'll be bringing in logs, configurations off of all of these services. We'll be also looking at resource metrics, both at the service level and at the job level and at the data level. Take all this information, go ahead and correlate this because we want to be that single pane of glass, right? We want to be that one-stop shop for all of the data users that we're empowering in the platform. And last but not least, putting on some of that machine learning algorithms so we can give you those really crisp performance insights and recommendations so you can get the most that you need to ultimately lower costs, improve performance, and speed migrations. And if we go and sample set our typical customer base now, the data engineer, he's happy, he's hitting his SLAs, his ETL jobs are hitting the mark, so he's feeling good. The data operations folks, not getting many tickets anymore. So now they feel self-service optimization, and now they're focusing on other projects that they've been pushing off because now they have time to do it. The data architect, it's rest easy. He's got a migration plan, and he knows the best way to move maybe his Hadoop migration or Hadoop Spark jobs into Databricks, and he can feel good that it's a data-driven approach from that standpoint. Last but not least, our favorite business unit leader. And now that business folk can now feel good about achieving their goals that they want from the product standpoint, and ultimately making money for the company, which is good for everybody. So one more dimension I'll show to you guys is we also have a unique play into this whole DataOps lifecycle. Not sure if everyone's familiar. Unravel Data, as a company, we do host about 2-3 times a year the DataOps Unleashed, which is a DataOps conference for everybody in the DataOps space to go ahead and practice. And some of the key themes that we hear about here is, just end-to-end data observability, right? So starting from plan, coding, testing, deploying, operate, monitor, rinse and repeat, right? Another angle of this would be looking at it from a development standpoint, right? Maybe we're going to rinse and repeat first at sandbox, then we're going to promote, then we're going to do it in staging, and we're going to promote that in production, and we go ahead and we scale from that standpoint. Now, we talked about things just very high level, but just to give things a little bit more concrete, some of the things that Unravel helps with at each stage of your DataOps journey is when you're planning, hey, are you selecting the right technology to begin with? Are we selecting the right instances? That's something that Unravel is able to help you with. When you're starting to do code, so for the folks that are the data engineers writing these Spark codes or ETL transformation, SQL code, making sure that we're debugging it, we're optimizing it, and providing proactive insights and recommendations so that way they're writing performant code. Testing, making sure that things are testing and up to snuff in terms of hitting the right SLAs. Deploying, making sure now we're looking at resources level, making sure that we're sizing appropriately and not wasting resources. Operate, making sure that, hey, now that deploy. So we deploy. Operate is making sure that everything is running as expected. And last but not least, monitor and continuous optimization, giving those proactive alerts when things happen. And then again, giving you those root cause analysis with the intelligence that's built into Unravel. So that way you can be confident when you're scaling your DataOps lifecycle processes. All right. For that, I'll hand it back over to you, Stephen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. At this time, we're going to dive into questions from our viewers today. Ben, the first question is for you. What is some actionable advice you can provide to a data ops or data engineering team to start being more DataSecOps minded?
Okay, so hi again. So my number one advice, I would start with prioritization, and prioritization on databases or data warehouses, or where there is sensitive data, and also the locations within them where there is sensitive data. And if you are unsure of that, then that would become my first priority. Of course, each organization can be different, and sometimes, when you hear about how something is structured within the organization, you can reach different conclusions. But I would start with prioritization, because there's usually a question of resources, and the best return on investment would be to give your attention to sensitive data. That's one thing. And the other thing would be to have clear policies around data access. Who can access what? When do I revoke access that I gave to data? And again, especially sensitive data. I think that's where I would start from.
Understood. Thanks, Ben. Okay, Ashwin, our next question is for you. Can Incorta be used with Tableau, Power BI, or other visualization tools?
That's a good question, Stephen. Yes, you can use it with Tableau, with Power BI, with most other tools for last mile access. Because what Incorta does is its key value proposition is building these logical data sets. Right now, we make these logical data sets available as a Postgres database to external tools. So it's very easy to connect to us. If you want to use us as the analytics and query layer, and then have other tools for last mile consumption, you absolutely can.
Okay, thanks, Ashwin. Chris, our next question is for you. What type of recommendations can I expect Unravel to provide for my Spark ETL code?
Very good question there, Stephen. So, some of the things that we do is, we'll look at all the inner workings of a Spark application. If you break that down, there's lots of things. It could be things on the data side. It could be, the infrastructure itself, right? So some things that you can expect is like code level recommendations, right? Is this, my best choice of, code piece that I would like that's going to be more performant? Some other things to think about is like identifying inefficiencies. Like if there's a lot of shuffle partition going on, or if there's a lot of, things that are going on the code level that need to be addressed, that's going to be highlighted to say, Unravel is going to tell you, hey, this is something you need to fix. We'll also look at things from a configuration standpoint. If you talk to lots of, some of the largest the dev shops, usually when I start, going down the list and asking them, how are you defining your jobs? They'll usually say, hey, we usually take a copy of, my other job, or maybe I took a copy of, best practices from my coworker and I use it for my job, right? But as we know, one size does not fit all. And so what Unravel will do is we'll look at how that Spark application had run and actually give you the exact, precise, crisp recommendations on this is what you need to do from a performance standpoint. This is what you need to do from a resource efficiency standpoint, especially if you're paying for it in like the cloud. So that way you're meeting your SLAs, but most importantly, we're really being even more of a resource for folks like that are more junior, maybe the folks that are going into Databricks for the very first time. Being to up level them to expert level has been very a key value use case that's we provide for our customers.
Got it. Thanks, Chris. Ben, back to you. Companies are have been dealing with sensitive data for decades. Why is there a need for them to change how they deal with it now?
So I think the change is has to do with how organizations are consuming data, where once a limited amount of people were accessing data, it was also both from a consumption point of view as well as from a storage and processing. Now more individuals and teams within the organization own more data and access more data and make more and more value out of data, and the data changes faster. So the ways that were right for for a data system that has a DBA team putting everything in a neat way, and no one is changing any schemas, etc. The ways for that were X, and now the data is involving more teams, more users around the organization, with more semi-structured data that has sensitive data within it, with more data that is moving, changing, getting enriched, and being accessed in many ways by different teams. It requires a different approach, and that's what I discussed, the DataSecOps. And I also wrote a piece in DBTA itself about DataSecOps a while ago, and you can visit our own website to download the guide to DataSecOps. And I think that this calls for the change of mindset, the change of how we use data as organizations.
Understood. Thanks, Ben. Ashwin, another question for you. How long does it take customers to cut over from legacy analytic applications to Incorta?
Yeah, another great question, Stephen. It depends. Like I said, we have a customer who signed up for a trial, liked what he saw with NetSuite analytics, and was up and running and was lighting up his dashboards in a couple of days, right? Or maybe 2 to 3 days at the most. And then you've got other scenarios where you've got large enterprise customers for whom it's obviously not that easy of a cutover, right? But it still means you go from a matter of doing this with large deployments that take months, like 6 months, 12 months, and now you're seeing that without all the customizations and those needs, you're able to cut over in somewhere from 2 to 3 months. So we've seen customers reach that point where they hand off to their line of business users with some pre-built samples and some pre-built content in about 2 to 3 months for large enterprises. But for some of the smaller enterprises, smaller use cases, it's sooner.
Got it. Thanks, Ashwin. Okay, Chris, this should be an easy one. How can I try the Unravel product?
Awesome. Great question there, Stephen. So we're, if you want to try it today, unraveldata.com, right there, as soon as you log in, there's going to be a sign up button there. So free trial, we give 100,000 free hours for folks that wanted to just try it, and it's unlocked. It's the full everything with Unravel. So, would definitely ask for that. For folks that may not be comfortable with a SaaS type of evaluation, we're also can be found in each of the major marketplaces. So Microsoft or Azure, AWS and Google as well. So many ways to try us out. Again, I think our value prop's pretty clear in terms of the value that we're able to provide, and making it easy for folks that may want to just first try it out. We make it easy for you to sign up in those ways.
Got it. I've got a question I would like to ask all three of you, and Ben, we'll start with you. If there's one thing you would really like our audience today to walk away keeping in mind, what would that be?
So that would be, of course, besides trying Satori, that would be the obvious one. But the second one would be to include security as a first-class citizen in the DataOps process. To get security teams involved in data projects and not as something that is bolted on at the end of the process when everything is already said and done.
Got it. Ashwin, how about you?
Yeah, agree with Ben, and I think just from this sharing the forum with the two of them, Chris and Ben. There are some great companies with some great products in a modern data stack, right? And there's so many ways to solve a problem. But when you build a solution from the ground up and it's purpose built and it solves a specific set of problems, it definitely helps with enterprise analytics, operational reporting. If that's your mojo and that's something that you're looking for, then do look at Incorta, and it's easy to sign up for a cloud trial. And the best way to know whether the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, if you sign up and you're able to pull your data quickly and start to get meaningful insights, then you found the right solution for your analytics, data and analytics stack.
Understood. And Chris, last but not least.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And learned a lot from Ben and Ashwin. So again, thank you for your time. Just one thing I would leave to the audience is that things are always evolving. I mean, the hot, stacks, the hot, the infrastructure, who's going to be the leader, all that stuff is going to change. I wouldn't even say years. I would say every in months, right? And so making sure that you have, a platform that's going to be purpose built for making sure you have the insights, and also getting that, those proactive insights and recommendations driven by ML and AI, getting in front of it. So that way, just know that things are always going to be changing, and that you have a strategy to keep on changing with the ever-changing technical landscape that is DataOps. And we feel that we can get you there.
Okay, well, I would like to give a big thank you to our speakers today for coming on board and sharing their insights and expertise. Once again, Ben Herzberg, Chief Scientist at Satori, Ashwin Warrior, VP of Product Management at Incorta, and Chris Santiago, Vice President of Solutions Engineering at Unravel Data. If you in the audience would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived, and we will email you once the archive is posted. And if you would like a PDF of the deck, you can go to the handouts section on the console once that archive is up. Also, just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced tomorrow. We'll let you know if you are the lucky viewer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.